Hi, this is Kim Droptiny. I'm reading chapter 13 of Grief Open the Door to Heaven by me and read by me. And this chapter is, again, chapter 13, Wreath of White Roses. Focusing on Jesus brings peace. Your problems can wait until tomorrow. Michael Wells. After the Berlin memorial for Gabe, we flew home to be with our family, have a second memorial service, and scatter his ashes. Germany has a law that says you cannot transport an urn of ashes out of the country on your own, but must have it flown by an approved transport service. So the package containing the urn was waiting for us at my sister's house. Mindy looked uncomfortable when she handed me the package. There's a label on the package that says damaged. I'm not sure what it means, but wanted to warn you before you open it, she gently told me. She left Brianna and I alone to open the parcel, and as we unwrapped the brown paper packaging, ash began to seep all over. Brianna went and found some newspaper to lie on the carpet. We were shocked to find that the urn had only been loosely wrapped in newspaper and then placed in a cardboard box with no cushioning around it. We slowly opened the lid of the urn and to our consternation found only a small amount of ash inside. Then we saw the crack in the lid where the ash had leaked out, most likely during the flight. Even though we knew that the ash only represented Gabe's flesh and bones, we were angry and indignant that the company had treated so casually something so precious to us. Tilo took photos of the chipped lid, and we decided not to pay a cent to the cremation company in Berlin for their shoddy service. After our return to Berlin, a lawyer friend of ours agreed to fight on our behalf, but somehow a judge sided with the cremation company, and we had to pay the full price for the transport of the urn plus interest. To this day, we aren't sure why we lost that case, except that life isn't always fair. I had no money in my bank account at that time to pay the bill, as well as the lawyer's fee, but the Lord provided. Somehow extra money came to me. I can't remember how, but it was the right amount. I have the promise tucked in my heart that one day the Lord will right all wrongs that have been done. Also, I know that I have done wrong to others, and the Lord doesn't judge me as I deserve, but offers His grace, love, and forgiveness. So I need to do that too. In the end, my son is alive in heaven, and that's enough for me. Just as in Berlin, the Lord went before and opened doors that made Gabe's second memorial service just as wonderful. We were allowed to use the same church that Brianna and Gabe had used for their dad's funeral, and free of charge. Brianna and I decided that this time around we would do all the speaking, since at the Berlin memorial I had asked someone to share the gospel, and sadly it was not done. It had been so disappointing because I knew that Gabe would have wanted the good news preached at his homegoing celebration. I determined, as did Bree, that this time it would be done. I woke early on the morning of the service, and as I was praying, I had a strong sense that Jesus anointed my head with oil. He told me to remember that I always have a wreath of white roses on my head. When I moved to Berlin in 2008, I lived on a street where a lot of punks and anarchists lived. They liked to throw their beer bottles down on the sidewalk, scattering glass all over, and let their dogs defecate freely. Someone told us that they hoped to keep rent prices down that way, but they were all squatters living rent-free in abandoned buildings. It was an extremely dark atmosphere. During a worship service in those early days, the Lord had given me a vision of myself walking down those streets in a beautiful white wedding gown. I had a wreath of white roses in my hair, and I saw Jesus walking right beside me, guarding and guiding. Thereafter, whenever I walked down those filthy streets, I had a consciousness of Jesus' presence with me, and the yuck of the streets would fade away. About a year after that vision, I met two beautiful German women who prophesied over me. In part, they said, "We see a crown of white roses on your head." Wow, was that ever confirmation? We praised the Lord together, and thereafter, whenever they saw me, they called me the White Rose. So, when Jesus told me on the morning of Gabe's memorial to remember that I had white roses on my head, I knew he was telling me to remember me, that I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. The only reason white roses were on my head is because of his pardon for my sin. His blood cleansed me, and in his eyes, I am his beloved daughter. When I stood to preach, and all my thoughts and most likely demons screamed, "Who do you think you are?" I remembered the white roses and pushed on to preach the gospel with confidence. The Lord sent my beautiful friends with whom I had prayed with weekly for years to support me in prayer before and during the service. They urged me to give an altar call and were available to pray with those who came forward. The Lord also sent us a violinist, a beautiful woman who was struggling with cancer and yet gave of her gift freely. One of Gabe's good friends offered to play drums, and another friend played bass, while Tilo led on the guitar. We sang one of Gabe's favorite songs, "Beautiful" by Phil Wickham. As we sang, "When we arrive at eternity's shore, where death is just a memory and tears are no more," my tears mingled with the beauty and truth of that song. Words can't even describe the feelings I had singing that song and knowing that my son was in heaven, worshiping Jesus and telling him how beautiful he is. I was sure that Gabe was very proud of me for using his memorial service to preach the gospel. Afterward, one of his closest friends who had been saved but was back on drugs knelt at the altar. He is now a missionary in Cambodia, and another friend prayed to receive Jesus into his life. I had prayed for that young man for years, and I thought I could hear my son say, "Mom, isn't it worth it all?" And I could answer honestly, yes, it was. Brianna and I knew that having people around us, loving and caring for us, was in a way distracting. We wondered, after both memorial services were done and dusted, what would happen next? Would the loud silence of grief fully dominate our lives and leave us at the mercy of the great anguish? I prayed that the Lord would continue to meet us in the shadow of death, and I tried to remember that it is only a shadow. That's the end of chapter 13. I really appreciate you listening to my story of my son's passing. May the Lord bless you, and hopefully I will see you in chapter 14.